And now, broadcasting from deep behind enemy lines in the occupied territory of the Socialist Republic of California, your host, former California State Assemblyman and Governor candidate, Tim Donnelly.
Hey, welcome to another episode of the Radio Free California Network. I am your host, former California State Assemblyman Tim Donnelly. And, you know, there's never a shortage of things to talk about as long as Donald Trump stays in the news. I don't know if you saw the latest story, but he's number one in the polls. He's they did a let me pull it up here because I'm trying to be green. I'm trying not to I'm actually trying to be cheap. I don't want to spend all the ink to print all these stories, but there is a story that Trump trounced runner-up former Florida Governor Bush. 15% of Republicans selected him as their first choice. This is in the latest poll done by Economist/YouGov. Now, here's the best part. He is leading the pack thanks to his strong stance against illegal immigration. You know, it's funny because I was the staunchest and most outspoken individual in the California State Assembly. And when I ran for governor, I enjoyed a very strong support in the polls. I think in large part due to that. But let me tell you what happens. And so far, Trump is not doing this. But if you hire anyone who is in the political establishment, the first thing they're going to do is try to tone you down. And you know what? Donald Trump could hire some political wannabe who's never won a race, who tries to tone him down. And if he listens to the guy, if he takes the advice he's paying for, which right now he's not doing, he won't have a chance. He's rising in the polls because he's telling the truth, even if he doesn't do it with perfect language. He's rising in the polls because you have a guy who's throwing punches. He's not sitting there waiting for someone to tell him what to think about things. And we are going to treat you to an extraordinary clip in one of the best interviews that I've heard in a long time. And I want to make something perfectly clear here. Do I sound like Nixon? I am not a crook. That's my Clinton/Nixon. All right, so I do not agree with Donald Trump on every issue. I know that Donald Trump is not I don't know. He's not your typical conservative. Let me say that in terms of being predictable on every issue. But he is one of the smartest and shrewdest individuals who's in this race because he's stolen the headlines. He's out there pounding the airwaves without having to leave New York. And everybody's talking about him. That part is rather fascinating. And what's funny is he's got hardcore Christian conservatives supporting him now, even though nobody really, I haven't yet heard his stance on abortion. I heard him say that he's for traditional marriage. And then they said, well, what do you have to say to all the gay activists who are in the streets, you know, who just scored this victory at the White House, or I'm sorry, the Supreme Court? And he said, I don't. And the interviewer said, you don't what? He said, I don't say anything. I was like, wow. And that's, look, he didn't give up what he believes in. He just didn't bother. He didn't go that next step and make it his business to go offend whoever he doesn't agree with or whoever doesn't agree with him. So I find it fascinating that here he is in number one in the polls, and he's number one in the polls, not because he's playing it safe, not because he's listening to the wannabe advisors who regularly ruin campaigns for those who might otherwise make it into the White House or a governor's race or, the state house or what have you. But we're gonna play you a little bit of a clip, and we're gonna go through this whole clip and then comment on it as we go through it. And I want you just listen to the way that he handles this reporter and exposes, without being a jerk, but he exposes her innate bias. He exposes the little tricks she plays. And you may not agree with everything he says, but you got to admit he's bold and he doesn't back down, and he's hard to fool or toy with, which you can't say about too many politicians.
So my first question, why are we here in New York? Why aren't we out on the campaign trail?
Oh, I've been to Iowa many times. I've been to New Hampshire many, many times. I love the people there, and we've had tremendous success. We've had tremendous crowds. Nobody gets as many standing ovations, and I spent a lot of time out. I was in South Carolina recently, and we're all over. I'm going to, this weekend, I'll be with Clint Eastwood in California, tremendous group of people. I'm going to Arizona this weekend. I'll be all over the place.
You were one of the only candidates who didn't campaign during the 4th of July. Pretty much all of them were up in New Hampshire, and you were not there. You've had no campaign events really this week, no campaign events planned for next week that we know of so far. You're not campaigning that much. How can anybody take you seriously if you're not out there showing your face?
Because I'm doing television with you, and I am up there actually a lot, and I watched them up there walking the streets, and it didn't mean anything, and I was actually getting more news coverage than anybody else by far, because I'm the one that brought up the whole situation and the whole mess with immigration and what the Mexican government is doing to us. So, I didn't have to be, and I would have been if they wanted me to, and I just decided that probably it wasn't necessary. I'm going up actually next week, and I'll be in Iowa many times over the next number of months, and New Hampshire many, many times.
Let's talk immigration, since that's the hot topic. Yesterday there was news coming out from the Washington Post about your hotel site in D.C. There are a lot of immigrants working on that, including some who say
legal immigrants,
that they are not here. They're not legally here.
They didn't say that. No, if you read that article, it really doesn't say that. In fact, the writer was very surprised they weren't able to find anybody. We have a very strong system. I have a contractor that's one of the biggest in the nation. They're doing it. So far, they're doing a very good job. They have a very strong verification system. And the whole story was about, they thought they were going to find people, and they weren't able to find them.
They did find some people who said that they were undocumented.
Well, they certainly didn't write them down and write their names, and we're very strong on that. And, with 11 to 31 million illegal immigrants in the country, it's pretty hard to be in a position where you actually can't find anybody. That's going to be a fantastic job. That was sitting there for years, like 30 years, empty, vacant, a disastrous situation. I took it over. We're going to have one of the great hotels of the world. We're very proud of it. We're also very proud of the building and the building practices.
Are you concerned, though, for the people that are working for you to put these buildings up? One of the workers told the Washington Post, do you think that we're hanging out of the eighth floor window and we're raping or selling drugs? We're risking our lives and our health. These fumes are toxic. Do you have a reaction to that when somebody says that about your job site?
Because I was just totally misquoted. In fact, I could read. I could give you a copy of the speech. I could read this. I was so misquoted that it's incredible. I'm talking about the Mexican government forces many bad people into our country because they're smart. They're smarter than our leaders, and their negotiators are far better than what we have. Like to a degree that you wouldn't believe. They're forcing people into our country. This guy that killed the wonderful young woman from San Francisco, he went back to Mexico. They forced him out. They force people into our country, and they are drug dealers, and they are criminals of all kind. We are taking Mexico's problems. Mexico is beating us on trade, and they're beating us at the border. But Mexico doesn't want to take these people, so what do? They send them to our stupid politicians, and we have sanctuary cities, and we have all of this nonsense. I've been saying this for a long time, Katie, and it's a disgrace. And frankly, if I didn't bring it up, you wouldn't even be talking about immigration right now.
When was the last time you were at the border?
I've been to the border probably 3 or 4 times over the years, and I have many people that live around the area. I'm going to Arizona this weekend where they want to talk to me because Arizona is, somebody said I'm the most popular person in Arizona because of my stance, and I'm going to be there this weekend.
When was the last time that you were there?
You got to love the way that Donald Trump handles every question. He doesn't back down. He doesn't apologize. He goes after the truth. And he really doesn't care who he offends. And one of the other things I like is he doesn't apologize for speaking the truth. And yes, he did clarify his initial remarks, but he's been demonized ever since. But I think the reason he's number one on the polls, and I would love to hear your thoughts at 323-746-TALK, is because he's fighting for America. And people like that. Be right back after these breaks. Whether you're an experienced shooter or just buying your first gun, Turner's Outdoorsman has everything you need, along with a knowledgeable and friendly staff to help you find that perfect gear for your next adventure. Turner's now has 18 locations across Southern California, including a Victorville location right on Bear Valley Road. Be sure to check out the new Archery Pro shops in the Victorville, Chino Hills, and Pasadena locations. If you're not sure what you're looking for, you can browse and shop their selection at Turners.com. Be sure to check out their weekly specials and sign up to get them delivered directly to your inbox. Turners is where I turn for all my firearms and ammo needs. Remember to tell them Tim Donnelly sent you, and you'll get an additional discount.
I'm here to tell you, honey, that I'm bad to the bone. Bad to the bone.
Now that is a great song to play for our all Donald Trump all the time segment. This guy just is, he's amazing. I don't know what else to say. As I've said before to those, I know he has his haters, I know he has his lovers, but he's the only one in this race that is actually standing up for America. And I think that's the key to his success. I think that's why he has now surged to number one in the polls. And by the way, Jeb Bush is going to have more money than Croesus by the time this is over. And he's going to turn his 50 caliber machine guns on Donald Trump. He's already done that, and the establishment is so angry about him. There's stories in the news that the national chairman of the Republican Party, Reince Priebus, is probably someone you've never heard of, called him up and took him to task. What does Donald Trump do? He sends out a tweet and says, nope, never happened. He says, as a matter of fact, Donald Trump or Reince Priebus called me and said, man, you've really struck a nerve. Good job. Now, most politicians don't do that. They don't actually correct the record that directly. But I think it's part of why he's being so successful, because he will not let them get away with anything. Now, listen to this segment where he talks about the border, and the little reporterette is trying to nail him on when was the last time you went to the border?
That when somebody says that about your job site?
Because I was just totally misquoted. In fact, I could read. I mean, I could give you a copy of the speech. I could read this. I was so misquoted that it's incredible. I'm talking about the Mexican government forces many bad people into our country because they're smart. They're smarter than our leaders, and their negotiators are far better than what we have. I mean, like to a degree that you wouldn't believe. They're forcing people into our country. This guy that killed the wonderful young woman from San Francisco, he went back to Mexico. They forced him out. They force people into our country, and they are drug dealers, and they are criminals of all kind. We are taking Mexico's problems. Mexico is beating us on trade, and they're beating us at the border. But Mexico doesn't want to take these people, so what do? They send them to our stupid politicians, and we have sanctuary cities, and we have all of this nonsense. I've been saying this for a long time, Katie, and it's a disgrace. And frankly, if I didn't bring it up, you wouldn't even be talking about immigration right now.
When was the last time you were at the border?
I've been to the border probably 3 or 4 times over the years, and I have many people that live around the area. I'm going to Arizona this weekend where they want to talk to me because Arizona is, somebody said I'm the most popular person in Arizona because of my stance, and I'm going to be there this weekend.
When was the last time that you were there?
Probably 3 years ago.
So how do you, if you haven't been there in 3 years, how do you know that it is such a problem?
Oh, because I knew it was
right
bad then,
there.
it's worse now.
Right there. This is exactly how the drive-by media, which her entire goal, forget about ideologies, forget about the fact that 79% of reporters are, at least back when Bill Clinton was president, voted for Clinton. Forget about the fact that there's a strong left-wing ideology within the media. She's trying to trap him and act like he doesn't know jack about the border. Now, the only thing I maybe could have helped Donald say it better, and I don't know if I would have thought of it until, sometimes you think of the right answer 3 hours or 3 days too late. And in that moment, he's excellent at it. But he could have said, well, duh, of course there's something rotten at the border if you've got a guy that we've deported 5 times and he makes it back with no problem because he knows he can get to a sanctuary city. And it's not just the border. The policies of the politicians are actually more of an incentive for people to come here illegally. Well, let's just lay it out here in California. If you come to California and you are a military veteran like the Noskinator, you pretty much have to obey all the laws. You, if you want to go to college, you got to pay full boat. So hopefully you got a GI Bill, but let's say you don't. You're paying full boat. Let's say you came here from another state and you are serving in the military. You don't get the in-state tuition that we give to illegal aliens. And in many cases, we have people who are illegally present in the country who get to go to college fully, absolutely, 100% for free. As a matter of fact, you pay them to go to college. You give them money for books. You pay all of their tuition. It's called a BOG grant waiver. And this is what we've done. If you need food, boom, you're going to be taken care of with your EBT card. If you come here illegally, we will carve out pretty much any and every law that is in existence. We will carve out an exemption for you. Let's say that you decide you want to become a lawyer. You didn't bother to come to the country legally, but you want to be a lawyer so that you can be an officer of the court. You can practice law in the state of California. Are you with me?
I'm here.
So, we passed a law when I was in the assembly that allows you to practice law even though you are not qualified to even serve on the jury in the courtroom in which you might practice. That's how far Jerry Brown and the Democrats have bent over backwards to say if you've come into this country illegally, you are better than citizens. You are better than military veterans. You are better than every other American because you don't have to obey the law. We're going to change the law to make life easier for you. And not only that, not just allow you to practice law, but any profession that requires a state license, another exemption. And you remember when I was debating our good friend, Assemblywoman Lorena Gonzalez, who perpetually says the word "meow." When I was in that debate with her. That was the bill that was granting essentially an exemption. You no longer had to have proper identification to actually get a state license to practice a profession that requires one in the state of California. You could give a false identification. You could just use a taxpayer what's called a TIN, a taxpayer identification number, instead of a Social Security number. Well, what does that do to people who are abiding the law, people who are Californians, American citizens who've been here a long time, legal immigrants who came here the right way? It puts them at a disadvantage because basically there's no rules and there's no law. And that right there is what led to the death of Catherine Steinle in San Francisco. We're going to continue this topic when we get back. 323-746-TALK if you want to weigh in. If you've been listening long to the Tim Donnelly Show, you know that we talk constantly about defending freedom and about defending our natural inalienable rights. The Firearms Policy Coalition is a partner of the Tim Donnelly Show. But more than that, they're on the front lines every day in Sacramento and all across the state, in the courts, defending your Second Amendment right, that is a natural right that the government merely acknowledged in the Second Amendment. If you value your freedom, then you need to join Firearms Policy Coalition. Become a member. I'm a member, and I'm happy to support an organization that is doing such an incredible job. Go to joinfpc.org. The Tim Donnelly Show sent you. Or go to timdonnellyshow.com and click on the FPC link to make it easy. But whatever you do, join today. FPC.org. Oh, you want me to say something? The Noskinator's giving me this eye, and I'm just sitting here going, should I say anything or just let the music continue? And I actually thought about saying, welcome back to the Donald Trump Show. Because this is the hour of Trump. And this hour will likely trump every other hour in the pithy, quotable comments. This guy is on fire when he just fires back. Now, roll it back just a little bit, because I went off on a long rampage when really Trump can defend himself. So let's hear what he does.
That you were there?
Probably 3 years ago.
So how do you, if you haven't been there in 3 years, how do you know that it is such a problem?
Oh, because I knew it was bad then and it's worse now. It was terrible then and it's worse now. It's worse now than it's ever been. We don't even have a border. People are just flowing through like water. There is no border right now.
The murder rate in El Paso, Texas, which is right on the border, is the lowest murder rate for any of the big cities in the country.
Don't try and convince me that there's no crime, that it's wonderful. The people that are being forced in, and these aren't just Mexican people, the people that are being forced, Mexico doesn't want people, they're forcing them into our country, and we're taking them and we're putting them in our jails and our hospitals, and we're paying them money through different sources. It's a disgrace. Don't tell me about safety. Are you trying to justify safety at the border? I don't think so.
We have a lower incarceration rate for Mexican immigrants and illegal immigrants. And
one thing that Donald Trump doesn't say here, but is an extremely relevant point, is El Paso may well have a lower crime rate than San Francisco. Because last time I checked, I don't think El Paso is a sanctuary city. As a matter of fact, anywhere along the border, that's where people tend to be apprehended. So they want to get out of there as quickly as possible. Now, one of the problems if you live in a border city is the proximity, meaning for those of you who are thinking actually of voting for Jeb Bush or Hillary Clinton, proximity means closeness. So the proximity to our neighbor state of Mexico, our neighbor, our trading partner, well, the drug cartels control that border. And they regularly murder people for whatever reason they choose to, and especially anybody who gets in the way of them trafficking drugs, guns, or people. And so there is that. Now, if the drug cartels come in and kill 2 people in your town somewhere in South Texas, well, that may not be considered a crime wave, but it sure has that effect on people because they're terrified. Anybody who was a witness to it may now be killed next. I mean, these are not guys that are robbing the local liquor store. They have no problem murdering 20, 30, 40 people at a time. There's been over 100,000 killings by the drug cartels in the last 5 years, so many that they've lost count. So when she says, well, El Paso, Texas has a low crime rate, well, when you look at the region as a whole, it's a war zone. When you look at the fact that the Border Patrol is taking fire, machine gun fire from across the border and having to ground their helicopters and the president won't do anything, this is a serious issue. But nobody's talking about it at that level except Donald Trump. And I guarantee if you look at these sanctuary cities, you will find some of the highest crime rates compared to other cities of similar size elsewhere in the country that actually enforce the law.
Lower incarceration rate for Mexican immigrants and illegal immigrants than we do for any U.S. born citizens.
It's a wrong statistic. Go check your numbers. It's totally wrong. It sounds good. It sounds good. It's a wrong statistic. Check your numbers.
So do you think that there's...
And by the way, I'm not saying... I have great relationship with the Mexican people. I have many people working for me. You can look at the job in Washington. I have many legal immigrants working for me. Many of them come from Mexico. They love me. I love them. And I'll tell you something. If I get the nomination, I'll win the Latino vote. I will win it because I'm going to create jobs. Hillary Clinton is not going to be able to create jobs. I will tell you right now. Neither is Jeb Bush going to be able to create jobs. I will create jobs, and the Latinos will have jobs that they don't have right now, and I will win that vote.
And right there.
And everyone thinks, oh, gee, Trump.
Right there. That was the point that Robert, who called in from Hemet, who said he's Hispanic, he's supporting Donald Trump because he'll create jobs. And I love the fact that he told him, go back and check your numbers because your numbers are wrong. She said, well, it's a Pew Hispanic Research. He said, go back and check. He didn't care. He didn't. Most politicians, when they hear a source cited, they buckle at the knees. Now, let me tell you something. First, I'm going to ask you a question. How many people do you think are in the United States illegally?
Well, that's not fair because I already listened to his video. It's somewhere between, 11 and 31 million. They just don't know. Okay.
See, you handicap the... I should have put it out there on the phones. That would have been a much better way to do it.
Okay, but still, 11 to 31, that's a huge range that they don't know.
No, well, let me just clarify. The number 11 million was invented out of whole cloth about... Let's see, we're in 2015, right? So 2004, 11 years ago. 11 years ago, they were looking around for a number. I think they took a dart and they threw it at the dartboard. and there's an 11 on the dartboard, right? I think it goes up to 20, doesn't it? Well, whatever. But they threw it at a piece of paper that had numbers on it, and they came up with 11. And that number has been the number. And this is why I always caution people who only get their news from what I call the left stream misinformation which is the mainstream media. You are being fooled by newscasters who can read that statistic with a tremendous amount of conviction, right? 11 million. What are we going, how many times have you heard a politician, what are we going to do about the 11 million that are here in the United States? And they always say it with this, like, ooh, I gotcha. Okay. It was 11 million in 2004. Back then, there was a mainstream publication called Time Magazine. They did an in-depth story on the number of people who crossed through. Remember, we talked to Chris Cabrera, the Border Patrol agent, and he said the people who get away. And back then, what Time Magazine did is they said, we want to estimate how many people are actually coming. And we want to use a very conservative format. And so for every person they catch, they assume that 3 got away and made it into the country. And for every person they catch, that person makes it back in within 3 days, 80% of the time. And that was confirmed by Chris Cabrera. And these numbers were upheld by Border Patrol. According to the numbers in 2004, if they were solid, and we know this is seasonal, so they're not solid year-round, but if the numbers had held, according to the most conservative way to evaluate how many people were actually illegally crossing the border, in 2004, it would have been 7.8 million people at the rate that they were coming across, in large part because Bush had been talking about amnesty. So that was the numbers spiked up in a huge way. So obviously 7.8 million didn't cross the border that year. But maybe 1 million did, maybe 2. So then the number, 11 million, was never adjusted upward to 13 million. It's always stayed $11 million. Here we are 11 years later, and it's 11 million people. Well, let me tell you, I had a conversation with somebody deep inside the bowels of the Catholic diocese. And they told me that the Catholic Church believes the number to be 30 to 40 million. And obviously, I am on the opposite side of the Catholic Church on the issue of illegal immigration. They want to create a sanctuary country. They want to create sanctuaries within their churches. They have been very active and very outspoken in defense of massive unchecked illegal immigration. And look, they've done some good in terms of protecting people who have been victimized, and I applaud them for that. But I don't think that they would just make a number up, because it doesn't suit their purpose. So somewhere between 11 and 40 million, and I think it's closer to 40 million is your accurate number. Whenever the media gives you a figure on illegal immigration, or the government gives you a number, your best bet is to triple it. Because back when Ronald Reagan did the amnesty in 1986, he was told there were 1 million illegals present in the country. And within the next 20 years, that's how long the amnesty lasted, 3.5 million ultimately got that amnesty. So anyway, when Donald Trump says, go check your numbers, he's exactly right. I just wish he knew what I just told you, because it would be phenomenal to hear somebody at that level just knock them back on their heels, because somebody needs to defend this 11 million figure, and I don't believe anybody can. If you can, call me at 323-746-TALK, but I think it's just a made-up number, and only time will tell. But we'll be right back with more on the Tim Donnelly Show and the Trumpinator right after these messages. Hey, you've heard me talk over and over again about Burro Canyon Shooting Park, which is arguably the greatest place on the face of the earth to exercise your Second Amendment. But it just got better, because if you mention the Tim Donnelly Show, they'll give you free stuff. You get a free hat, free coffee cup while supplies last if you mention Tim Donnelly Show. So get out there and get shooting. For directions or more information, call Burro Canyon at 626-910-1344. Hey, welcome back to the Radio Free California Network. We stream live at timdonnellyshow.com every day, 3 to 6 p.m., and then right after. Right when the show ends, the minute it ends, it replays on the stream. So if you missed any portion of the Tim Donnelly Show, you can catch it. You can also go to timdonnellyshow.com, hit previous shows, and catch up with all our podcasts. And you can connect with us. Facebook, Twitter, email. Let us know what you're thinking. And we're going to go to the phones because there is one other way to connect. 323-746-TALK. Dan from Sonoma. Dan, welcome to the show.
Hi, Tim. Thanks very much. It's easy to see why Donald Trump is gaining popularity. I mean, well, first of all, let's back up. It's going to be a very, very long campaign. The baseball All-Star game is next week. The 2016 World Series champion will be crowned before the presidential election is over, so we've got a long way to go.
A lot of games.
Early run, yeah, a lot of games ahead of us. In this early going, though, people are angry. They're frustrated. They see the government doing things that they're opposed to. They're opposed to bailouts. They're opposed to Obamacare, exploiting racism, amnesty, deals with Iran, but the government is not listening to them. And this is why they resonate with someone like Trump, who has energy, calls it like he sees it, and they identify with his anger and frustration towards this government.
So let me ask you, Dan, are you saying that people are supporting Donald Trump, have catapulted him to number one in the polls because they see him as a proxy for their own anger, and he is reflecting it, even if they don't agree with him, maybe on every one of the issues?
Yes, it's similar to the 1992 campaign with Ross Perot. If you remember, Ross Perot was an angry little man, and people that were just as angry rallied around him. Now, they couldn't agree upon anything except that they wanted Perot as president, but they identified with his anger. I think in time, though, going back to our election, as the debates get going and as some of the candidates start to show what they're made of, I think Trump will fall to the wayside. But in this early going here, Trump is the front runner, and he will be for a while. Well,
I would disagree with you slightly and say that he has more than anger, though. I mean, he clearly has an energy and a passion and a love of America. He's expressed that in a way I think that really resonates. He's got ideas. This is a guy that's done a lot of things. And look, if you've never run a business, if you worked for somebody else your whole life or you worked for the government, then you have no idea what it's like to put everything on the line where you could lose your home, your livelihood, you could lose your position in the community. And he's done that a million times, and he's won and he's lost, but he's always been someone willing to risk everything.
Well, no question about it. I'm not disagreeing with that at all. You can't argue with success, and Mr. Trump is very, very successful. But again, I want to see what other issues he's going to be bringing to the forefront. I'm really not certain of his economic policy, his policy overseas, some of his other policies here. I think there's going to be a few people that will rise again. I think one of the most underrated politicians out there is Ted Cruz. Again, he's the smartest one of the bunch, and he's the only one that's not supporting Trump, but he's not backing away from it.
Well, no, he said I salute Donald Trump. So he's definitely separated himself from the pack. But I'm going to look on this poll here Because in most of the polls that I've seen, as much as I like Ted Cruz, and I do, I like him. I'm a friend of his father's, and I would venture to say I probably agree with him on almost every issue. He has been consistently trailing in the polls, but then again, usually the front runner in these early polls, as you said, crashes and burns, and somebody else emerges. So I would say that Ted Cruz has as much a chance as anybody else in pulling out, except for maybe Lindsey Graham. We don't think he has a prayer.
He's a joke. But one last thing, Tim, before I let you go. One of these things these polls and pundits never really talk about is what I call the gorilla in the room, and that's the Obama administration. I mean, it's an abomination, to say the least, regarding what he's done. There's a lot of anger and frustration for what he and his administration have done and continue to do, and that needs to be factored in. So this is a huge burden for the left. Even if it's Hillary Clinton, even if she gets the nomination, she's going to have to overcome that stigma. I don't think she can. Well,
you may well be right, Dan. We're going to let you go. I hope that Bernie Sanders is their candidate because he's way more honest and entertaining.
You and I both. Thanks, Tim.
Hey, we will be changing the subject slightly at the top of the hour, and then we will get back into our discussion of the Trumpinator and sanctuary cities and whatever you want to talk about on the phones. Whatever you do, don't touch that dial.
Don't you think it's about time you treat yourself or someone you love to something very special? Well, Ozell Jewelers, the finest jewelry store in the high desert, is known throughout the high desert for having the largest variety of fine-looking jewelry and gifts for every special occasion. Ozell custom designs and manufactures their own jewelry, so you'll be able to find exclusive, one-of-a-kind, stunning styles you won't find anywhere else in Southern California. If you're looking for fine jewelry at unbeatable prices, Ozell Jewelers is the place to go. Show appreciation to that special person in your life with something special to cherish forever. Ozell Jewelers, voted best jewelers in the high desert by the Daily Press regularly for years. Ozell Jewelers has been putting smiles on high desert faces for over 30 years. Ozell Jewelers in Rancho Cucamonga, Palm Desert, and Amargosa Road by Red Lobster in Victorville. Ozell Jewelers.
Welcome back to the Tim Donnelly Show. We are going to change gears here pretty radically from having fun listening to Donald Trump. I mean, you got to admit, that's just fun. You're out there driving in your car. You're tired of hearing the pandering politicians sell you out and then come back to you and tell you why they failed and why you should reelect them so they can sell you out again, so that they can fail again, so that they can continue to organize around issues, but not really organize effectively and sell you out. Also, they can have a better job, a better life, and they can golf instead of work. And there are typical pandering politicians, and then there are people who are really, really egregious that shouldn't be in public office. And one of them, we're gonna roll a video here in a minute, but I'm going to tell you what happened in the California State Assembly in the Labor Committee. The chairman is an assemblyman from the West Covina area. His name's Roger Hernandez. And Roger Hernandez came to fame within his local community as someone who on his city council would regularly get into shouting matches and almost fistfights. When he ran for re-election the first time, the newspapers had a headline that his then girlfriend / fiance had pulled a restraining order against him for doing cocaine and then beating her. And yet the voters still re-elected him. Yeah, go figure. And by the way, at the time, and naturally, I forgot to tell you, he is a Democrat. But at the time, some pretty heavyweight Democrats in the Covina and West Covina area came out against him. A number of women came out against him who are Democrats and who are Latino, which is a big issue in his community and usually guarantees your election. And yet the voters put him back into office. So I want you to understand that before you hear the way that he treated an assemblyman, a brand new assemblyman from the Orange County area named Matthew Harper, who really was fighting for you. He was pulling a Trump. He was kind of going Trump on the issue. He wasn't being personal. He wasn't attacking anyone. He was fighting. I believe it was a bill about minimum wage, but let's listen to the tape, and then we'll bring Assemblyman Matthew Harper on to discuss it. Go ahead and roll that.
Madam Secretary, call the vote.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to have comments.
At this time, I'm calling the vote.
You're going to cut off people in the queue?
We're calling the vote. Madam Secretary, call the vote.
Totally inappropriate.
You're inappropriate and out of order. Madam Secretary, call the vote.
I think it's totally inappropriate.
Motion is due pass to appropriations. Hernandez?
Aye.
Hernandez, aye. Harper? Harper not voting. Chu?
Aye.
Chu, aye. Lowe?
Aye.
Lowe, aye. McCarty?
Aye.
McCarty, aye. Patterson? No. Patterson, no. Thurman?
Aye.
Thurman, aye.
Mr.
Right.
Chairman,
Thank
I
you.
think the cutoff on debate is completely embarrassing.
You're out of order. You're out of order. You're out of order.
Totally inappropriate.
Turn his mic off.
It shows you how this is being ran through the state of
Thank you,
California.
Mr. Chair and members.
Thank you, Senators, for your patience and your good work. Thank you very much. We have a bill on call. You can't be yelling in this committee like that.
No, you cut me off.
Excuse.
Totally.
Sergeants, please remove the mic. Remove the mic. Please remove the mic. You're yelling. You're out of order. You've not been recognized. I'm sorry. Remove the mic. I'm running the meeting, not the sergeant.
Yeah, obviously you couldn't see the video, but he lunges over with his hand, almost knocks over Assemblyman Matthew Harper and turns off his mic. It really gets out of control and on the verge of being violent, and then demands that the Sergeant-at-Arms do his bidding. Assemblyman Matthew Harper, welcome to the Tim Donnelly Show.
Well, it's a good afternoon today, but it was a little dicey yesterday.
Yeah. I am very familiar with Assemblyman Hernandez, Roger Hernandez. Let's be clear, because there's also a state senator. I'm not sure if he's still in office, Ed Hernandez, who's very different in temperament. We were in the middle of a very...
They currently represent the San Gabriel Valley area. One in the state Senate, one in the state assembly. Yeah.
Sure. So he's still in there. In the middle of a very contentious debate on the floor, Assemblyman Roger Hernandez thought it was appropriate, when he couldn't make his point and he couldn't convince me, to shove me backwards on the floor, which, as you know, you're not allowed to touch anyone. It is completely inappropriate. And by the way, it's the only time it ever happened was with him. And he has a history of this going back to the West Covina City Council, where he literally would yell at people, get in their faces, and nobody has ever seen that side of him until it was captured on video yesterday. So tell us what happened.
Well, I'll tell you what. This is my 17th year in public office. I was the mayor for the city of Huntington Beach last year, and on my 4th year on the Huntington Beach City Council, and I've been on the school board for 12 years before that. And this is unlike anything that I've ever seen, or unlike anything that other folks around me have seen. If a mayor had done this to a city council member, it would be absolute outrage. And at least some of the folks in Sacramento seem to be feeling that same outrage. But it was a tough day yesterday. We had had several bills be presented. There were a couple of bills that were presented by President Pro Tem Kevin De Leon. They were voted on a party line vote. On this committee, there's only 2 Republicans allowed on this committee. We do not come in significant numbers, and there are 5 Democrats. So they got us outnumbered big time already. Those 2 Kevin De Leon bills were both voted on 5-2. And then we came to the big one. This issue is the most high-profile issue that we visited in the Labor Committee this year.
This is the minimum wage?
It's a minimum wage increase, but it's more than that. Not only would it increase the minimum wage to $13, but it would actually take the minimum wage increases out of the hands of the state legislature and put the increases on automatic according to the Consumer Price Index.
Wow.
So making it so that there would be automatic increases in perpetuity, and you wouldn't even be able to hold legislators accountable for that significant an impact on the economy. And as you're probably familiar, they also have a very significant impact on state spending.
Well,
because
sure.
of how many state folks and state employees are their wages are tied.
Right.
To
a lot of union members and public sector union members have their wages increases tied to an increase in the minimum wage. So they would put it on autopilot to create wage inflation that would then create inflation on a gargantuan scale in terms of the ultimate cost that we pay for government.
And it does a lot of things that distort the free market. It makes it very hard for teens and young people to be able to get their first job. I know when I worked minimum wage myself, it was 2 of the jobs that I held when I was in high school. And when you inflate the cost beyond the value that people can produce for usually a small business or a small franchise, it makes it so that those folks are unaffordable. Instead, you end up decreasing the overall number of jobs available.
So, Assemblyman, let me ask you a question here, because the general listening audience is not familiar with the insider baseball or insider politics of city council protocol or protocol in committees, whether in the Assembly or the Senate. So, I am, because I was there. So basically,
yes.
you have testimony presented, in this case by the Senate Pro Tem Kevin De Leon. He presents a bill. So
this bill was the final bill, and it was actually co-authored by Senators Leno and Leyva. Leyva represents the area east of Los Angeles, and Leno up in San Francisco. And then we had questions and testimony, and then it came to the committee members, and
right. So
when Democrats got to speak.
When you say you had questions, so you had testimony from the public, from supporters and opposition to the bill. Mm-hmm. And then they actually allow, and by the way, I want to emphasize this point. There is a fundamental right for you to ask a question as a member of that committee. You are equal, even though you're outnumbered, when it comes to the process and your First Amendment right to speak on behalf of your constituents. There is no limit on that. You can't be just shut down and shut off. You have a right to ask a question. True?
And we do, and that's a part of my grievance to the Speaker, because of course all the chairs serve at the pleasure of the Speaker of the State Assembly, the way the rules are set up.
Okay, so what happened?
And so what had happened is all the Democrats got to speak, and in fact, for much of the meeting, I had actually chaired, because the Chairman Hernandez was out of the room at another committee or doing some other business during a part of this. But each of the Democrats had gotten to speak. My colleague, Jim Patterson, he was able to speak, but we had coordinated our remarks, and so he was going to cover one area of issues, and I was going to cover another area of issues. He had acknowledged that I was the next speaker after Evan Lowe, who's he's a freshman Democrat that's on the committee. And as soon as Evan Lowe was finished speaking, even though he said that he would go to me next, he said debate is over, and I think you had played the audio in which he just goes straight to a vote. And I insisted on objecting and saying that, I was next in the queue. I have remarks to be able to make. I want to be able to make those remarks. I didn't hear any objections that were coming from any of the Democrats saying, hey, let's let our membership be heard. And that was one thing I was particularly disappointed on, is that the members in the majority party didn't step up and say, hey, this is wrong.
Well, Assemblyman, let me put you on hold for.
They've been shocked.
Let me put you on hold for just a couple of minutes. We got to take a break, but I want to get the rest of the story when we get back.
I'll be back with you.
Hey, if you find yourself in my hometown of Twin Peaks, don't leave without stopping by the grill at the Antlers Inn. It's right in the heart of Twin Peaks. They serve dinner every night. They're right there at Highway 189 and Bear Springs Road. They have the best steaks, the best sushi. No matter what you have, make sure you call ahead for a reservation. 909-336-2600. 909-336-2600. And tell them Tim Donnelly sent you. Hey, if you are just tuning in to the Radio Free California Network, where you been? You miss half the show. But good news for you, all you have to do is go to timdonnellyshow.com and click on Listen Live right after the show ends, and you can hear the show play in its entirety all over again, right on the stream. And if you miss more than one show, do not despair. Simply click on our previous shows and you can listen to our podcast. And we have some pretty great shows in that podcast. We are talking with Assemblyman Matt Harper from the Orange County area. Matt, what are the cities, the main city that you represent? Where are you from?
Got coastal Orange County, Huntington Beach, Costa Mesa, Newport Beach, and Irvine.
Okay. And so you were minding your own business, trying to do your job, trying to ask a simple question about a bill that is going to have staggering effects on the economy and the future of small business owners, and could wipe out job opportunities for people who are just getting into the job market, or teenagers who are trying to have their first job. This massive minimum wage with an automatic wage hike in perpetuity. And in the middle of trying to ask your question, you were in line, you had raised your hand, you were on the list, you had been acknowledged, the chairman said you're next, and then he just steamrolled right over you, went straight to the vote, and you protested, and then he he leaned over, you can see it in the video, and shut off your microphone.
Outrageous. It's outrageous.
But then he didn't stop there. He talked about you after the vote was taken. He tried to act all normal, but you could tell he was really huffy and angry because he had lost control of himself. And then he says something about, well, he shouldn't be yelling. And this is a guy who, I don't know if you know this, is famous. He's infamous for screaming and getting into shouting matches and violent altercations in his previous job as an a city councilman in West Covina, and including personally physically assaulting me on the floor of the California State Assembly. Then he tries to get the sergeant-at-arms to do his dirty work, and I noticed there was some hesitation on their part. They didn't seem as excited to come over and steal your microphone.
There was some interaction between two of the sergeant-at-arms, and I think one was going to do what he wanted to do, and then the other one was kind of like, maybe we should check whether this is really the good thing to do. But honestly, by the time that they had, grabbed for the mic and were ready to pull it out, I had leaned back and everyone had just kind of moved away from the dais at that point. But to ask for that kind of engagement and to literally pull your mic away, he reached for my mic, but he was unsuccessful in taking it himself. Just as the antithesis of democracy. This is one of those undemocratic things I've ever seen.
It's a violation of your First Amendment right to speak. You are the elected representative of the people of the coastal California region and all those cities. Every single one of those people, and there's something close to 500,000 of them, you are their voice. You have a constitutional right to ask questions, and for them to, and you were not out of line, by the way. You were not out of order, even though he says you're out of order. I want to make this point, because a lot of people just don't understand the insider baseball. So for him to have denied you the opportunity to speak, then for him to lose control of himself and turn off your mic, try to steal your microphone, and then get the sergeants. I'll tell you why I think the sergeants hesitated. Because while they can be compelled by the leadership to do almost anything, they serve at their pleasure, they do know the law and they know the Constitution. And one of those dirty little rules, actually it's a nice rule, is that you do have that right to speak. And if you were not doing something wrong, and you weren't, you were protesting the fact that you've been denied the right to speak on behalf of the people. And it's not like you were in a fist fight and then you wanted to get to the dais and have your say. You didn't wander in drunk and then wanted to have your say. You literally just said, hey, wait a minute, I was in the queue, right?
Yep, that's exactly a part of what I said was, if I wanted to speak, I'm in the queue. I'm the next speaker. I'd like to speak.
So what happened after that? You went to the speaker.
Once they took the vote count and we had settled those out, he was, still badgering me, saying that I was out of order. And I told him that I'd, take it up with the speaker. And so, I communicated that I would, to the speaker's office, that I would be sending a formal communication, grievance in regards to this behavior by the chair. I spoke at the Republican leader's office. She had left back for her district already for the evening, but talked with her office so that at least I knew that my caucus was behind me. And I'm very happy to say that not only is the leadership of the Republican caucus behind me, but every Republican member of the caucus has acknowledged that they support me to being able to speak, because each of them know if this can get done to me, it can be done to all the other 28 members of the Assembly Republican Caucus.
Yeah, and look, you're going to talk about really contentious issues, but there is a decorum that exists, and you're not supposed to abuse or intimidate or assault or impugn the other members. You're supposed to treat them with respect, even when you vehemently disagree. But that's how the whole system works, right?
And most importantly, and you hear this at the end of that tape, is I express on how upset I am that they're trying to ram this bill through, because as it currently is, it looks like the Democrats will probably vote for this bill, this automatic minimum wage increase. But the whole point of having it go through the committee process and then going to the floor is so that you can ask the questions. That's right. So that you can discuss
Assemblyman, I hate to cut you off. I'm not doing this like the chairman. We are out of time. Appreciate your fight. Keep up. Hey, if you like shooting as much as I do, you've probably been to a lot of ranges. Unless you visited Burro Canyon Shooting Park, you've never seen anything like it. On the way there, you'll find yourself taking pictures as you traverse the majestic Azusa Canyon and wind your way up into the Angeles National Forest. With over 600 acres, including 19 private ranges, there's something for everyone. There's rifle and pistol ranges for beginners, right up to advanced shooters. And there's plenty of spaces to shoot sporting clay. You can make a family day of it, or you can bring a group for team building exercises. Bring a picnic lunch. On the weekends, they provide lunch. And don't worry, they always have ammo in case you forget yours or run out. One thing I can guarantee, is that once you visited my friends at Burro Canyon Shooting Park, you'll be hooked and you'll keep coming back. BurroCanyon.com is their website, or call them at 626-910-1344. 626-910-1344. It's hard not to be hot-blooded after hearing that video and seeing the behavior of people that are supposed to be in charge of our government, people that are supposed to conduct themselves in accordance with a certain set of decorum, rules. Common decency. You don't interrupt another person. These guys already have a clock, by the way. There's a certain amount of time. You can limit their time. But generally, that's not done to members of the legislature who are asking questions. They'll even allow you to engage in some back and forth, and you get an answer and you ask another question. Now, they might not let you do that 6 times, but they'll probably let you do it 3 times. Well, they didn't let Assemblyman Matt Harper do it even once. They cut him off because he was obviously fired up. He was obviously going to make some good points. He was going to make the committee go longer, and they probably needed to get to their golf dates. Or, they needed to meet with lobbyists across the street so they could be bought off. I don't know. But I do know that what this labor chairman, Roger Hernandez, did is a huge violation of the etiquette of that institution. And it's going to be very interesting. We'll keep you apprised on the outcome, because if the Democrats don't rein him in, if there is no punishment for him, if he doesn't lose his chairmanship, then they lose credibility. Now, in California, when you have a super minority of Republicans, you might say, does it really matter? Well, right now it doesn't. But it will not be forgotten if the Republicans ever manage to get in the majority again. If they continue on their current track, that's unlikely to be a threat, but you never know. Stranger things have happened. Let's get back to the Trumpinator, who did an epic interview with NBC, and when we left off, he was telling the reporterette, go back and check your numbers, and then he took her to school.
That vote. And everyone thinks, oh, gee, Trump is going to not do well with that vote. I'll do better with that vote than anybody. And I have thousands of them working for me at different places that I have all over the country. I will win that vote.
Why should people believe your numbers when you come out here and say that they're committing crimes and they're in our jails and they're murdering us and taking our jobs? A few years ago, you led the birther movement. You sent investigators out to Hawaii to find out whether or not Obama, which you said was not born here.
Well,
and
I
it turned out
don't
to
know.
not be true.
Well,
so
I don't know. According to you, it's not true. I don't know.
He released his birth certificate.
If you believe that, that's fine. I don't care. It's an old subject. I'm about jobs. I'm about security. I'm about fixing the military. I'm about taking care of our vets. I'm about things that you don't have to bring up old subjects. Whether he did or not, who knows? A lot of people don't agree with you on that, by the way. But I'm really about economic development, and I'm about jobs, and that's what we have to start talking about. And I'm about beating ISIS militarily and not acting like a bunch of babies like we're acting right now.
Do you have a plan for ISIS?
I do have a plan, actually.
What is it?
I would knock the hell out of the oil areas because they're rich as can be. They're building a hotel in Iraq. They took over a hotel. They're renovating a hotel in Iraq. They're renovating another hotel in a different location. They have nothing but money. It's coming out of their ears, and they're getting most of their money from oil.
Would you
and if
send
you
ground
remember,
troops?
excuse me, Katie, if you remember, Number one, I said you shouldn't go into Iraq anyway because you're going to destabilize the Middle East. That's exactly what happened. Then I said, once you're in, if you're leaving, keep the oil. Well, ISIS has the oil and Iran has the oil. If they would have listened to me that way, and I was very strong. The Bush people in 2004 sent people to my office because they didn't want me to say what I was saying. And I'm more into the military, by the way, than anybody. But you have to know when and where to use the military. We made a tremendous mistake. We spent $2 trillion, thousands of lives, wounded warriors all over the place, who I love, by the way, all over the place. And what do we have? We're not even there anymore. And Iran is taking over Iraq. In fact, they're meeting right now. Iran is taking over Iraq. We got nothing for it, zero. And it's really a sad situation. With ISIS, you kill them at the head, you take the oil. That's where they're getting their money. If you bomb the hell out of it, you bomb the hell out of it. You've got to stop their wealth. They have tremendous wealth. I'm talking about oil. I'm talking about oil areas. I'm not talking about civilian areas.
Civilians are near oil areas.
Oh, give me a break, Katie. Go ahead, next question.
Let's say domestically. A lot of people are killed by gun violence in this country. What would you do about that?
Well, you have a lot of people that are killed by guns, but I'm a big Second Amendment person. You know, when the prisoners escaped up in New York, which was a tragedy in itself.
Don't you love the way he says, first of all, that's an old matter, let's move on. And then second of all, he's like, oh, give me a break. Next question. He doesn't say something that's quotable for the papers. He doesn't give them something to hang him on, and yet he doesn't dodge the questions either. Yeah, let's get him back on guns.
People that were against guns said, thank God we have guns. I remember seeing on television a woman saying, I was always fighting with my husband. He wanted guns. He felt so strongly about guns, and I would fight him. Now we have a gun in every drawer, a gun on every table, in case these guys broke into the house. It's very interesting. No, I'm a Second Amendment person.
What about people that walk into churches and shoot people, or walk into schools and shoot people?
They're sick people. These are very, very sick people. They'll be able to get something somewhere.
Are you not more concerned about them than you're concerned about illegal immigrants coming in here and
I'm
killing
concerned
people?
about everything. I'm concerned about the country. Our country's going to hell. I'm concerned about everything, okay? Our country is being beaten in trade deals by China, by Japan, by Mexico. Mexico is the new China. Mexico is killing us in trade. We're being beaten at every front. We're being beaten militarily. We have a military that every time we send equipment to our so-called allies, one bullet is shot in the air, and we lost 2,300 armor-plated Humvees. Not 3 or 4 or 7. We lost 2,000 in one day. 2,300 Humvees. I say, that's impossible. How can you lose that many? A bullet gets fired into the air, and the people that we're giving these Humvees to, they run like bandits, and the enemy takes them over. The enemy has better equipment than we have because we're foolish.
You're for the Second Amendment. Do you have a gun?
I have a license to have a gun. Yes, I do.
Do you own one?
Yes, I do.
Do you use it? Gun range?
It's none of your business. It's really none of your
Right
business.
right there. That is the perfect answer. It's none of your business. Because these politicians, see, if he said, I have one gun, then they're going to say to the gun people, well, he doesn't really believe in the Second Amendment. He only has one gun. But if he says, hey, I've got an arsenal, I've got 400 rifles and, AKs and ARs and, handguns and and I got a whole gun room, then, of course, they're going to paint him as, a redneck from wherever, a bitter clinger, and he just says, it's none of your business. I wish he would have said, it's none of your damn business.
License to have a gun.
Gun control.
What are you talking about?
Or
you
stronger background.
Yes, I have a gun.
Checks.
Excuse me. Yes, I have a gun, and yes, I have a permit to have a gun.
Stronger background checks. What about that? Is there any steps that you would take to make it harder to get a gun in this country?
The problem is, once you get into that, you start getting into a situation, the slippery slope, where all of a sudden you're going to really violate the Second Amendment. I don't want to do anything to violate the Second Amendment. To me, the Second Amendment is very important. I
want to talk about what some of the Republicans have been saying about you just this week. You've been very divisive for the party. You have Charles Krauthammer, who's called you a rodeo clown.
Well, Charles Krauthammer is a totally overrated person who really dislikes me personally. I never met him, but I mean, he's a totally overrated guy, doesn't know what he's doing. He was totally in favor of the war in Iraq. he wanted to go into Iraq and he wanted to, stay there forever. So, these are overrated people. I see who it is. I mean, you can mention name after name. By the way, you're going to mention the ones that do like Trump? You don't do that, do you?
Goldberg has compared you to a failed man who mistook flattery for insight. George Will.
I'm a failed man. I'm worth a fortune. I built, you know what? It's interesting. I went to the best school, got the best, great marks, everything else. I went out, I made a fortune, a big fortune, a tremendous fortune. I'll be announcing that in about a week because I have to file my papers, bigger than people even understand. I have a book called The Art of the Deal. I do The Apprentice. The Art of the Deal was like the #1 business book of all time, or just about, I think it was. And I do The Apprentice, and NBC's angry at me because they renewed The Apprentice and I wouldn't do it. And that's one of the reasons that NBC's so angry at me. And then I get called by a guy that can't buy a pair of pants. I get called names. Give me a break.
So you will release your financials on time?
Absolutely. Yeah, we're going to have it on time. In
That's
fact,
8 days from now.
Excuse me. I'm allowed 45-day extension and another 45-day extension. I don't expect to be using any extensions. On time is really not on time because you're allowed automatically 2 45-day extensions. I don't think I'm going to be using them. I should be filing. They're very complicated. These papers weren't meant for me because of the complexity and the bigness of what I have. But we should be releasing them ahead of schedule.
Where do you get your money from?
I made it the old-fashioned way, in real estate. In real estate. I made it, and I made a lot of money doing everything I did. I made a lot of money with The Apprentice. I made a lot of money in real estate. I made a lot of money, everything I did. I've had great success.
What about the companies that have backed away?
You got to just laugh. I mean, her whole entire narrative is, let's hang him up on an issue that we know has worked in the past. We are the media. We're going to run a campaign against this guy because he's making headway. And let's get him on guns. Let's trip him up on business. See, you're not allowed to be rich or successful in this country if you want to run for office. And he's like, hey, I'm rich. I can finance my whole thing. I don't need lobbyists to give me money. I use lobbyists to fight the government. And I'm not owned by anybody. And I think that, going back to what Dan was saying earlier in the show, I think that's a big part of the Trump appeal. Is he just says, hey, go pound sand, go back and get your facts straight. Come on, let's move on. Give me a break. Come up with a real question. And every one of the traps so far that they set for candidates that run for the Republican nominee, he has not only avoided them, he has leaps and bounds over them. And the one mistake that Donald Trump has not made is being boring and backing down and apologizing for the truth. We'll continue right after this break with your calls. 323-746-TALK. Hey, if you find yourself in my hometown of Twin Peaks, don't leave without stopping by the Grill at the Antlers Inn. It's right in the heart of Twin Peaks. They serve dinner every night. They're right there at Highway 189 and Bear Springs Road. They have the best steaks, the best sushi. No matter what you have, make sure you call ahead for a reservation. 909-336-2600. 909-336-2600. And tell them Tim Donnelly sent you. Welcome back to the Hour of Trump. We have been having a great time listening to the Trumpinator. And, you know, if you're a political candidate and you're thinking about running for office, you really should take notes. Because people don't like people who prevaricate. They don't like people who lie. They don't like people who pander. They like people who say it like it is. They like people who punch back. And Donald Trump is leading the pack I'm going to go to your calls. We got Mike from Wrightwood. Mike, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks. It's always great to listen to a guy that can talk the way he does, and give stories. And it's funny when she keeps going to the first other thing, and, he says, well, not everybody agrees with you anyways. And it's like, it keeps, it reminds me of I talked to a person not too long ago and asked him, I go, so how well of a job do you think Barry Sotelo is doing? And the person looked at me stupid. And it's like, well, who's that? I go, it's President Obama's other name. I go, come on, you voted for the guy, you're a Democrat, and you guys don't realize he's got two names. I go, that's the problem with the system. And somebody like Trump, Trump goes on a show that he knows he's going to get attacked, but you're not going to see Barry going on Sean Hannity.
Yeah.
He's not going to take the question.
Yeah,
and,
that's a good point. It shows his courage.
Right, and it's just, it shows that he's not going to play, political junk. He's not going to go out there and when he gets asked a question, say, well, I'm going to answer with a question. He goes out there, he gave her an answer. She don't like it, too bad. And it's really kind of a dumb question to ask somebody, do you have a gun? Yes, I'm, allowed to have one. Well, do you carry one? Yes. Well, do you use it? No, I just take it and put it on my mantle. I mean, the guy obviously goes to a range because you have to qualify. So, I mean, to ask somebody if they use something they have legally, and then to start coming up with these things on how we can make it harder.
No, Mike, where she was going with that, right?
Well, yeah. She wants to, just like the rest of them, they want to try and get it down to, getting away from taking the guns away from us, doing harder backgrounds, making it impossible. And in case people don't know, I mean, they are taking guns away from us. All of us vets, they're automatically listing us with PTSD. People like me, I testified against guys in Al-Qaeda, had death threats, and now I can't go down and buy a weapon because the government listed me with PTSD. So they're trying to backdoor it. And when you get to somebody like Donald Trump, I could see Donald Trump putting an end to that and saying that we're allowed to have the weapons.
Exactly.
We deserve a right to protect ourselves. We protected the country. We come home, and they turn our back on us because they think that somehow if we take guns away from the people that legally use it, that know how to use it, that are trained to use it, that all the criminals are going to turn theirs over and say, here you go, we won't shoot nobody anymore. And it's so obvious when you look at all these mass shootings, they never happen in a place where everybody's allowed to freely carry guns. And in the time I spent in New Mexico, one of the greatest things was that you could walk down the street just like Arizona with a gun on your hip, and it makes people leave you alone.
Well,
Trump's the kind of guy that'll do that.
Yeah, I think you're right because the Noskinator, who's, by the way, is a big fan of Mike as well, you were making her crack up earlier. She said that Trump, in another interview that isn't this one, I don't know if it's in this actual piece, was asked, and he said he would end this business of making our military bases gun-free zones, that somehow people that we trust to carry weapons into battle, we don't trust to carry a weapon on their person in the event that the military base is attacked. That doesn't make any sense.
And and what really doesn't make sense is that if you actually go overseas and you go into a military installation, your soldiers are walking around with these weapons. We all have ammunition. They're attached to the barrels. They're attached to the hips. We have 180 rounds on us, but they're not inside the weapon at its time. And now they've actually taken all the old M16s, they rubberized them to get soldiers used to carrying weapons so that they don't have bullets. And they somehow think that, it's going to make a difference in life that, it's the least place in the world you have to worry about being dangerous. I was just at Fort Irwin yesterday, and it's so nice to be in an installation in the military where you're safe, it's free, there's no racism, everybody says hi, everybody has respect, and it's something this country doesn't have. But we have it there, which means that we can have it in this country, but we can't have it when we have people like Katie Couric and all these other people out there wanting to destroy, divide, and play this Democrat view of you need something, the government should give it to you, you're owed something because you were born here. Trump's the guy that says you want it, earn it, go get it. Don't sit back and wait for someone to hand it to you. And for that, I got a lot of respect.
Mike, thank you for calling in. I don't think the Trumpinator could have said it any better than you just did. But thanks again for your call.
All right, have a good night.
We got to take a break. 323-746-TALK. If you want to weigh in, we will be right back. So don't go anywhere. If you've been listening long to the Tim Donnelly Show, you know that we talk constantly about defending freedom and about defending our natural inalienable rights. The Firearms Policy Coalition is a partner of the Tim Donnelly Show. But more than that, they're on the front lines every day in Sacramento and all across the state, in the courts, defending your Second Amendment right. That is a natural right that the government merely acknowledged in the Second Amendment. If you value your freedom, then you need to join Firearms Policy Coalition. Become a member. I'm a member, and I'm happy to support an organization that is doing such an incredible job. Go to joinfpc.org. The Tim Donnelly Show sent you. Or go to timdonnellyshow.com and click on the FPC link to make it easy. But whatever you do, join today. FPC.org. I was really starting to enjoy this song. I want to hear the rest of it sometime. 323-746-TALK. You are tuned in to the Radio Free California Network, and I'm your host, former California State Assemblyman and gubernatorial candidate, or governor candidate, for those of you who are thinking about voting for Jeb Bush or Hillary Clinton. We're going to go straight to the phones. We've got Lee from Apple Valley Lee, you're upset over nonprofits, the green ones. Do tell. Welcome to the show.
Hi, good afternoon, Jim.
It's great to have you on, by the way.
Well, thank you so much for all your hard work that you have done for our communities, and I recognize you for everything that you've done.
Well, thank you.
I just wanted to bring a little bit of an enlightenment to people that probably don't understand what nonprofits do with their lobbying and the money and where it goes. I heard Laura Ingraham this morning call it Big Green, and I've got another name for it. I like to call it Gang Green.
I like that. That's clever.
Because it's green.
Because it's poisonous. It's toxic.
Well, that's what's going to happen to our country if we continue to let the ominous force overcome the people that have some brains in our country. And we need the people that do have some brains in our country to wake up out of their coma and participate in making sure that this doesn't happen.
Hey, wait a minute, Lee. We're going to tear down some Confederate flags. We're going to ban the Confederate flag. We're going to take away your guns. The whole country's going to be safe after that.
They're not taking away my guns. I live 5 miles up a dirt road, and I've got a bunker buried in a hole in the hill.
What do you use? Okay, so do you use your guns?
I would rather. I'll take the fist. I'll do the Trumpinator on that. I only use my guns if someone shows up and threatens my home.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's going to be coming to be knocking on your door now to try to sell you Tupperware now that you've announced your position. But look, I think that's how most Americans feel. We see now that the government and all these sycophant organizations, be they nonprofits that have no real purpose. Because look, there are nonprofits that do some good work.
They do have a purpose. They do have a purpose, and that's what I want you to know. And I want people to understand they do have a purpose, and they spend their money, and their purpose is to totally undermine the purpose for everybody and anybody that has any kind of interest in being a number one, having a home, having your own property. I mean, that's the sad part.
Give us an example.
Nonprofits have a purpose.
Give us an example of what you're talking about, so that people can understand and connect the dots.
I can't.
Well, fortunately I can, so I'm going to help you out. But
good.
but I am going to steal, with your permission. I'm going to liberate the term gangrene because I love it, and I think it's absolutely fitting.
It's appropriate.
It is. But
that's what's going to happen to our country.
You have a lot of quasi-governmental NGO/nonprofits that have operated in the Central Valley long before the drought made the front pages. And they targeted...
We're saving the little bitty fish.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But see, it's those policies of depriving the farmers of water in the name of fish, letting the good water go out to sea for no purpose whatsoever.
Absolutely.
Putting the farmers in distress, and then these organizations show up and they want to buy the farm. And they've got oodles of cash because it was funneled to them through a secret corporation that is managing the cap and trade scheme, which was authorized under AB 32. So that money goes to these groups. It goes. Let me finish. It goes to these groups that have these really nice sounding names, and then in the end, what they do is they buy your farm, and then they make sure that they make it a haven for animals, and the only people who are not allowed on this now public land are the public, and then they sell the water rights to a big city because that's really where they want you to live. So they're essentially enforcing a diabolical ideology that is supported by laws like SB 375 and AB 32, and our government is undermining property rights. It's undermining the ability for us to produce enough food. And what are we going to do? Import all our food? And then we have no food security. You don't have food security. You don't have national security.
Well, how fresh is your lettuce going to be if it has to come from China?
Well, yeah, might have a little salt on it from the journey.
I 100% support your AB 32 comments, and this is absolutely ridiculous. I am one of the major supporters of the fact that we have to be able to take care of our own communities, and we have to be able to support ourselves, and the fact that the federal government wants to regulate us and tell us how we can and can't manage our it's ridiculous.
Well, we couldn't agree more, and I think you have identified something that people are afraid to talk about because they hear the word nonprofit. They automatically assume it's an organization that is trying to do some good. And there are a handful of nonprofits that do actual good work so that the government doesn't have to do it, and they do it more efficiently. But there's a whole lot of them that are basically in the business of just reiterating and supporting and pushing an agenda that creates more government and more interference and the deprivation of our freedom. As a matter of fact, there was a meeting in my own community up in the mountains just today to create a whole new governmental organization so that they can control us. Well, I didn't move to the mountains to be controlled. I moved to the mountains to get away from those who want to control me. And I won't say how many guns I have, but I don't live on a dirt road.
Well, it's nobody's business.
Exactly. It's nobody's damn business. But Lee, thank you for your call. And thank you for listening.
Let me get in the last second or two. I live 4 miles up a dirt road because I don't want anybody to be in my business. And you're absolutely right that it's not right for them to be doing what they're doing. And what's happening is they're establishing rules for people who don't even know what's happening. And we need to start to take back our own country and our own communities.
Well, you said it very well. You would make the Trumpinator proud. Thanks for your call, Lee.
Thank you.
You know, it's great to hear clear-thinking Americans who can articulate the threat. And if I haven't said it recently, I think it all the time. But more and more and more, it's so clear that I just figure everybody gets it. The government, if you live in California, the government is the greatest threat to your freedom. Maybe it's not obvious to you. If you're a parent and you think you have a right to determine what goes into your kid's body, you want to make an informed decision. Forget about that. Not if you want your kid to go to school, or a public or a private or a charter school, because they passed SB 277 and they're taking that away from you. And you know what? they've made it about vaccinations so that you will be distracted. It's a smokescreen. It doesn't matter what you think of vaccinations. I vaccinate my kids, and I'm leading a referendum against that bill because it deprives. Basically, the government is overreaching way beyond any power that it could legitimately have. And in the end, why would you willingly surrender your free will? Why would you willingly surrender your freedom and your ability to make a decision, a serious health decision on behalf of your own children? You're going to outsource that to the government? The government that can't balance its budget and continually comes back to you wanting to steal more and more of your money? The government that doesn't trust you to exercise the Second Amendment, even though the founders put that front and center in the Bill of Rights, understanding that it wasn't about, back then, I don't even think they had sport shooting. Who would waste bullets? Shooting was for, you shot an animal so you could eat. You defended yourself against the threats that came to your front door. As a matter of fact, now the Noskinator probably doesn't go back this far, but in colonial times in America, especially if you lived on the frontier, you answered the door with a gun in your hand because you didn't know who was there. And you have people who came to this country fleeing religious persecution. They were persecuted by their own government for their beliefs. And they wound up having to fight a war in order to defend fundamental natural rights. But your government doesn't trust you anymore. Well, I don't trust it. And, all you have to do is listen to the headlines. What was that story today? There was some massive data breach. They can't control your data. You give the government your data, they're spying on you all the time, and then they get this data, and they can't even keep it safe. So you know what? I don't want them to have my data. I'll send them a tax payment once a year, and that's all. That's the only relationship I want to have with the government. I don't need them. I don't need them to do anything for me. I don't need them to protect me from myself. And by the way, when it comes to protecting myself on the streets, I do just fine. What is it today? You're getting me all worked up. 323-746. Great call from Lee in Apple Valley. We'll take more of your calls after the break. Whether you're an experienced shooter or just buying your first gun, Turner's Outdoorsman has everything you need, along with a knowledgeable and friendly staff to help you find that perfect gear for your next adventure. Turner's now has 18 locations across Southern California, including a Victorville location right on Bear Valley Road. Be sure to check out the new Archery Pro shops in the Victorville, Chino Hills, and Pasadena locations. If you're not sure what you're looking for, you can browse and shop their selection at turners.com. Be sure to check out their weekly specials and sign up to get them delivered directly to your inbox. Turner's is where I turn for all my firearms and ammo needs. Remember to tell them Tim Donnelly sent you, and you'll get an additional discount. This portion of the Tim Donnelly Show is sponsored by CAPS. That's Californians for Population Stabilization. If you're concerned about sanctuary cities and crime, you need to support an organization that works every day to make our communities safer by upholding the rule of law and exposing the truth about how unchecked illegal immigration affects the everyday Californian. Go to CAPSWeb, that's CAPSweb.org, and become a member today. Hey, we are going to go straight to the phones because we have a very good friend of the Tim Donnelly Show who took time out of her busy schedule to call in. That's Michelle Moons, who is a Breitbart columnist, and I believe is covering the Freedom Fest, if I'm not mistaken. Michelle, welcome to the show.
Hey, Tim. Yeah, you're right. We are covering Freedom Fest. We have a booth out here doing some interviews and talking to the various people here. There's just two 2016 candidates going to be out here, Rubio and Donald Trump, a last-minute addition. So, but at the same time, covering this really tragic case in San Francisco.
Yeah, you broke a story that, and I mean the headline is shocking. I mean everything in this case is shocking, and we have had a number of people on, including Jamil Shaw, Don Rosenberg, who have lost a son each to illegals, and Don lost his son in San Francisco, and dealt with the, I don't even know what to call them. They're not, I want to use the word Kafkaesque, but it's not quite right. It's almost like you're in Alice in Wonderland, where up is down and down is up and right is wrong and wrong is right.
Isn't that crazy?
San Francisco, an American city that is a sanctuary for illegal alien killers, cold-blooded, ruthless killers, and your everyday tamale lady that might be breaking the law and selling tamales at Walmart. They protect them all equally, as if there's no difference between that. But in your story, you're saying that the San Francisco sheriff, this Ross Murakami, who was charged with beating his wife, actually requested that this Francisco Sanchez, who ultimately killed, he didn't allegedly, he killed Catherine Steinle. He's admitted it, so it's not alleged anymore. He asked for him to be transferred to San Francisco?
Right. So it's been tough because there's a lot of information out there, but I've spoken specifically with ICE officials and with individuals at the police department. The police department has completely called out the sheriff's department over what has gone on here. And one thing I've heard reported that keeps kind of getting misreported is ICE never actually had him in custody before he went to San Francisco. He was being released from prison in Victorville, California. And
we are in Victorville, California. Well, we're on the edge of Victorville, California. What they have is they have an ICE detention center, and it's largely operated by a private for-profit corporation that incarcerates people for the government.
Okay, so he was in custody of the Bureau of Prisons and about to be released, but he wasn't actually in ICE custody. They were notified, as was the sheriff's department, that he was going to be released. And so what ICE did is they started filing paperwork to reinstate his deportation. So he would be essentially then deported. However, before they got a chance to get a hold of him, the sheriff's department up there requested that he be transferred up there on a 20-year-old drug charge. It was a marijuana possession for dispersing.
You got to be kidding. Well, I mean, San Francisco doesn't even prosecute marijuana crimes anyway.
No, and that is exactly what Sheriff Mirkarimi has told reporters. He said specifically, it's on video, we do not even prosecute marijuana in San Francisco, basically. And so he says this, and all of a sudden they're requesting that they transfer this guy on this 20-year-old warrant. And you know what happened? They transferred him on March 26th. He got transferred up to San Francisco from the Victorville Bureau of Prisons. On March 27th, he was in court, and they dismissed the charges the day after he got up there. And ICE was not notified until he was up in San Francisco, and so they go, okay, well, now we can't just deport him because he's in the sheriff's custody, in San Francisco County custody. So now we have to, the next procedural thing they have to do, and it's all this bureaucracy that's going on, right? They have to issue then this detainer request. And all it is a request that they be notified when the guy is going to be released so that they can then pick him up, and essentially then they would go and deport him again. But they know, the sheriff's department up there knows that, they would then be deporting him. So the sheriff comes out and says, San Francisco Sheriff Amir Karimi says, well, no, we don't honor those. I mean, they don't. The thing is, that is flatly their policy. But here it is. They know it's a five-time deported, 7-time convicted felon. They know, and they're going to release him, even though ICE says, well, we'd like to just be notified when you're going to release him.
Absolutely
we don't do that.
Insane. Michelle, can you hold over for one break with us?
Sure.
This portion of the Tim Donnelly Show is sponsored by CAPS. That's the Californians for Population Stabilization. If you're concerned about sanctuary cities, you need to support this organization. They work every day to make sure our communities are safer by upholding the rule of law and exposing the truth about how unchecked illegal immigration affects the average Californian. Go to capsweb.org. That's CAPS web.org and become a member today. You'll be glad you did. And I got to say, and we're going to play in the next segment, we're going to play a commercial that they did warning the public about sanctuary cities years ago. You won't want to miss it. Stay tuned. If you've been listening long to the Tim Donnelly Show, you know that we talk constantly about defending freedom and about defending our natural and inalienable rights. The Firearms Policy Coalition is a partner of the Tim Donnelly Show. But more than that, they're on the front lines every day in Sacramento and all across the state, in the courts, defending your Second Amendment right. That is a natural right that the government merely acknowledged in the Second Amendment. If you value your freedom, then you need to join Firearms Policy Coalition. Become a member. I'm a member, and I'm happy to support an organization that is doing such an incredible job. Go to joinfpc.org. The Tim Donnelly Show sent you. Or go to timdonnellyshow.com and click on the FPC link to make it easy. But whatever you do, join today. FPC.org. Hey, this portion of the Tim Donnelly Show is sponsored by CAPS, Californians for Population Stabilization, and this segment is called Sanctuary Cities Exposed. If you're concerned about sanctuary cities and crime, you need to support an organization that works every day to make our community safer by upholding the rule of law and exposing the truth about how unchecked illegal immigration and things like sanctuary cities, how it affects the average Californian. Go to capsweb.org, that's CAPSWEB.org, capsweb.org, and become a member today. And by the way, we're going to roll, I don't know if the sound quality is good enough, but we're going to wing it. We're going to roll a commercial they did several years ago warning about sanctuary cities.
Californians are a compassionate people. Our sanctuary cities defy state law so we can protect illegal aliens, even though they're named in 95% of outstanding homicide warrants in LA, even though they're wanted in up to 2/3 of fugitive felony arrest warrants. Illegal alien gang members get back on the street because our cops can't ask immigration status. Have sanctuary cities taken our compassion too far? Share your opinion at capsweb.org, paid for by Californians for Population Stabilization.
And we're joined on the phones by Michelle Moons of Breitbart, who has broken a story that the San Francisco sanctuary. I guess we should start calling them the okay, speak English here. The San Francisco, I want to say the San Francisco treat, right? But I'm going to say the San Francisco sanctuary sheriff actually requested the transfer of this killer to his city for a crime that they don't even prosecute, a 20-year-old marijuana bust. I mean, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah, no. It's quite serious. And I think you're seeing something interesting that's going to come up tomorrow, and I'll be hopefully able to, if I can get the stream of it, reporting on it, is the sheriff is going to do what he is calling a reveal the true facts about what actually happened about the release of this Juan Francisco Lopez Sanchez, who, by the way, has a lot more aliases and a lot more dates of birth, so it's really hard to track down his actual history.
I thought you were going to say that he was going to reveal the truth about beating his wife, but... there's... He got away with that.
And here's the interesting thing, and this is something that I was doing some research on him, and we ended up having our Second Amendment aficionado writer, great writer A.W.R. Harkins.
Who is a great friend of the Tim Donnelly Show, by the way.
Yeah, great. And so I passed along, and he did this great write-up on how the San Francisco sheriff is, because of that incident that you just mentioned, the incident with his wife, he is not legally allowed to carry a firearm. The San Francisco sheriff is not legally allowed to carry a firearm.
I don't even want to say what I want to call him now, but I know I'd get in a lot of trouble and get in a lot of papers. But look, it starts with S, and San Francisco would be perfect. But look, I mean, this is absolute insanity. What we're really talking about here. I mean, we are sitting not far from where Francisco Sanchez, or whatever his name is, nobody knows. He has all kinds of aliases, but we do know that he was a 7-time felon. He was 5 times deported. Why in the world would anyone in their right mind, first of all, request the transfer of such an individual to their city? But secondly, why would ICE give him over? Have you gotten any insight on that? Because I don't understand why they didn't just flat out deport him.
That's exactly it, is they didn't get to have him in custody. ICE did not get to have him in custody. It was Bureau of Prisons had him. And
so there was some kind of detainer on him.
Turn him over. They were starting to process a reinstatement of the deportation, and they were planning on taking him into ICE custody. But before they could do that, the sheriff's department swooped in, San Francisco Sheriff's Department swooped in and had him transferred before ICE was aware. ICE got notified after he was already transferred that he was transferred. So then they go, okay, now we've got to file different paperwork to request, knowing that they weren't going to honor it because San Francisco, as a policy, has said that they will not honor ICE detainer requests. It doesn't matter what this person is, what any person has done. You could have somebody that was a serial killer, and it wouldn't matter if they were just putting in this detainer request. They would not honor it as a policy in San Francisco and the sheriff's department up there.
Yeah, and I was present for the debate on the floor, which happened tragically a handful of years after the triple homicide of Tony, Matthew, and Michael Bologna, and after Jamil Shaw's son, Jamil Shaw Jr., 17 years old, was cut down in the prime of his life. And what was the reaction of San Francisco? Was it to reevaluate? Yeah, they tinkered a little bit. But in the end, the San Francisco Assemblyman, Tom Amiano, pushed to expand San Francisco sanctuary policy statewide. And they did. They succeeded.
Ridiculous.
And that means
you look at the Trust Act provisions, and that it allows this sort of thing. And as well as anyone, that we're allowing this to happen. California is allowing this to happen. And why? Do we have no respect for the rule of law?
Well, let me back you up a minute, because we actually played a clip of my speech against the first version of the Trust Act, which wasn't called the Trust Act. It was about opting out of the Secure Communities Program, which is what the Trust Act does. The Secure Communities Program says anyone who is foreign-born, you run their fingerprints by ICE. That's it. As soon as they're incarcerated, this is not just arrested, but actually in the system, you run their fingerprints by ICE. I'm sorry, they do have to be arrested and charged with some kind of a crime, but you run them through ICE. And then you find out if they have 5 other names. You find out if they're a dangerous criminal. And then maybe you can make an intelligent decision about whether or not to let them loose on the streets of a city like San Francisco or deport them. But here is the kicker. I read a letter from then attorney Jerry Brown, who refused the previous San Francisco sheriff to opt out. And he said, look, this is the only race-neutral way we have to protect the public, and your bill, your idea, your request is denied. Now think about that. And then a handful of years later, that governor flip-flops. They rewrite a couple words in that first version of that Trust Act that the governor vetoed, and in 2013, he signed it, and now we have our first victim that is getting national headlines. I'm sure not the first victim in a sanctuary city in California, but certainly the first one that made the papers.
Yeah, and you do think, like, this is so highly publicized, but you even look at the San Francisco Police Union, whatever you think of unions, they went on their Facebook page and they put out a thing that talked about the Bologna case as well. It called out the San Francisco Sheriff's Department for having that policy because there was early on some talk of the police department. They did not take this guy into their custody. They did not have him. That's not their responsibility. Fine. They called out the Sheriff's Department for both the Bologna case and this most recent one happening up there, and that they let these people go. And this Juan Francisco Lopez Sanchez and all of his other aliases, they knew that he was a danger, and he chose San Francisco knowing that they don't cooperate. So that means that here you go, you've got an actual example of those cities being magnets for people. He said he chose San Francisco because of those policies.
Well, just say it. So they're magnet for illegal alien killers, for illegal alien criminals. They're not magnets for the nice, everyday, average, what everyone thinks is an average illegal alien or illegal immigrant, whatever you want to call them, who has come into this country for a better life. These are people who intentionally wanted to hide so they could continue their lifestyle, and his lifestyle is crime.
Sure. And the other thing that we also need to talk about is the fact that, so he's been deported 5 times, and he went to a city where he knew that he wouldn't be deported again. But the problem is, he wasn't stopped from coming back into the country. So we need that border security. We need to reinforce our actual border because this guy was able to get back in. What's the point of deporting him 20 times if he's just going to come back in too?
Hey, be careful, Michelle. You're starting to sound like Donald Trump. Next thing you're going to ask the Mexican government to pay for the wall. Come on.
Well, hey, he's going to be here, so y'all out there watch.
Well,
I'm going to be covering it. But,
well, I hope that you get a moment to interview him, and if you do, certainly put in a good word for the Tim Donnelly Show, because we would love to have him on here. Tell us a little bit. We've only got about 2 minutes left, but tell us about the who you've talked to there at this Freedom Fest and what it's all about.
Okay, well, we had one of the people we interviewed was Dinesh D'Souza. Who else have we had by? We had one of the gentlemen that was in Benghazi, and he talked about part of his name is Chris. He was there. He's written this book. He's one of the authors of this book, 13 Hours, and they're coming out with a movie on it. That was wonderful talking to him, and he just has such interesting information. Definitely check that out. But we've been doing coverage on the fact that Rubio's out here, Donald Trump's going to be out here, the two of them, and kind of the contrast there and the immigration issues, It's quite interesting. And Trump's actually going to be going out and meeting after, or at some point this weekend, with Jamil Shah that you mentioned, that also lost his son to the actions of an illegal alien. And, you know,
we had him on the show earlier this week.
Yeah. And so you see that it's resonating with people. People are upset about this. It is a serious issue, and we cannot let this go forward with all this talk of amnesty. We need to secure that border. It is important, and it resonates with people. It's very important. So definitely be watching, because we've got just more people coming on. We're going to be continuing to do interviews, radio, and some stand-up video interviews as well. And you'll see that on the site, and possibly our radio show airs on Sirius XM 125 Saturday mornings at 7 Pacific time and Sundays at 4 Pacific time, and not conflicting with the Tim Donnelly show, so you can listen to both. And
you can, and
love to have people check into that.
We are fans, and you can connect with Michelle Moons at Breitbart.com, and I recommend you follow her on Twitter, and I think it's at Michelle Diana. And
Michelle Diana,
hey,
yep.
Thank you for the update, and I appreciate you checking in with us. You're doing some great work out there.
Thanks for having me on, Tim. This is a very important issue.
Absolutely.
And I know you know it.
Godspeed. Hey, this portion of the Tim Donnelly Show was sponsored by CAPS, Californians for Population Stabilization. If you're concerned about sanctuary cities and crime, and if you're listening to the Tim Donnelly Show, I assume you are, you need to support this organization. They work every day to make sure our communities are safer by upholding the rule of law and exposing the truth about unchecked illegal immigration and how it affects the average Californian. Go to capsweb.org. That's capsweb.org, and become a member today.
One less burned out star in the sky, leaving California tonight.
Hey, you've heard me talk over and over again about Burro Canyon Shooting Park, which is arguably the greatest place on the face of the earth to exercise your Second Amendment. But it just got better, because if you mention the Tim Donnelly Show, they'll give you free stuff. You get a free hat, free coffee cup, while supplies last, if you mention Tim Donnelly Show. So get out there and get shooting. For directions or more information, call Burro Canyon at 626-910-1344.
Like a star that can't wait for a night. I hate to think I've been blinded, baby.
Hey, you are tuned in to the Tim Donnelly Show. Surprise, surprise, in case you didn't know and just stumbled across us on the dial or the web. But we broadcast live 3 to 6 p.m. every weekday on Radio Free California Network. And you can stream us and you can connect with us at timdonnellyshow.com. You can also call in at 323-746-TALK. That's a number you need to program into your phone, because you never know. Because, you know what, it's been a while since we've given away anything, huh? We actually like to give away free stuff because it's just fun. Life's too short, and I figure, especially when I can give away a cheeseburger, since I haven't been eating as many and I'm off the energy drinks. Don't even get me started.
Woo woo.
Yeah. That's the physical trainer side of the Noskinator, who is on some kind of weird strict diet that involves bananas. And I don't know, is it paleo? Is it the jungle diet? I mean, what is this?
Oh no, this is much different than any of that. It's I'll tell you later.
Yeah, she's going to have to charge you if she gives you the advice.
I'm prepping for a figure show. That's all I'll say.
Okay. Well, good. I'm glad it's working for you. There is a little bit of good news. I mean, certainly all of this negative attention on San Francisco has provoked some pretty strong reaction. I'm waiting for there to be a rally outside of the San Francisco Police Department, Sheriff's Department. I don't know where this guy is, this Ross Mercuriami or whatever his name is. I'm just going to call him the San Francisco Sanctuary Sheriff, who has no shame. He can't even be bothered to tell the truth. Hey, I made a big mistake. This policy is a huge mistake. It cost a young woman in the prime of her life. It cost her family the opportunity of being there when her children are born, if she chose to have them. So her parents are gonna go into their old age without ever knowing what her children would have been like. When are we going to have riots in the streets? When are we going to have a massive protest to demand that not only does he resign, but the DA and the mayor and Kamala Harris and Gavin Newsom and all the people who got to power on the backs by walking over and stepping on the bodies of those who have been slaughtered in these sanctuary cities, like the Bolognas and now Catherine Steinle and the two sheriffs up in Sacramento County and countless other victims. Don Rosenberg's son, every one of them has been ignored while they continue to climb to power and ignore the pleas of the people. This is time for this to stop. And it's time for us to turn this around and turn it back on them. So we will continue to expose sanctuary cities here on the Tim Donnelly Show. I want to thank all of our sponsors, especially our new sponsor, CAPS, which you can go join at capsweb.org, capsweb.org. But I also want to thank my wife, who lets me do this, my producer, Bethany Nosko, the Noskinator, Cassie Cassidy, our intrepid guest booker, Sean McNeil, who keeps the trains rolling, which is no easy feat, and you, because without you, we don't have a show. Hey, we are here 3 to 6 p.m. every weekday. God bless you and Godspeed. Tim Donnelly Show out.